She said it so casually. We're just borrowing that night for the HOA Community Fund. Karen Whitaker's hand met my face before I could finish my sentence. But the part no one remembers is what happened after. It wasn't just the sting on my cheek or the sound of my complaint folder hitting the living room floor. It was the choice I made in that moment that changed everything. You see, some debts are not just about money. And I am the kind of person who always pays them back in full. My name is Mara Hensley, and I was 33 the night I learned that the most dangerous lies are the ones whispered in the quiet safety of your own home under the shadow of Pleasant Grove, HOA. It happened in Ohio, in a 2-story house with beige vinyl siding and a lawn my mother kept obsessively neat because the HOA Karen had already issued 3 warnings about unsightly grass length. We were the picture of suburban tranquility on Maple Lane, where every mailbox matched and every flag flew at the exact same height. Another unremarkable family tucked away in a neighborhood ruled by the absurd rulebook of Pleasant Grove, HOA, but inside, the silence was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, thick with things unsaid, a silence that coiled in the corners and waited for the next citation. My mother, a woman who had spent her life shrinking to fit the spaces people left for her, had become best friends with Karen Whitaker 2 years prior. Karen was the HOA president, aggressively normal in her late 40s with perfectly highlighted hair, a closet full of pastel cardigans, and a firm handshake that felt more like a claim than a greeting. She spoke in reassuring tones about community values and neighborhood standards, but her eyes never settled. They were always moving, calculating, assessing the value of every resident and every dollar in the HOA treasury, especially when special assessments were discussed. Then a flicker of something sharp and hungry would appear, quickly disguised with a bland, neighborly smile. She called herself just helping the community. In reality, she spent her days cruising the streets in her white SUV with the HOA magnetic sign, clipboard in hand, issuing fines for everything from the wrong shade of mulch to a flagpole 2 inches too tall. While I worked remotely as a forensic accountant from my old bedroom upstairs, tracking phantom assets for a firm in Columbus, I was good at it. I found things people try to hide. It was a skill I had never considered applying to my own neighborhood until that night. The evening began like any other HOA friendly dinner. The air was thick with the scent of my mother's meatloaf and the low murmur of Karen's voice lecturing about the new beautification project. I came downstairs, my mind still parsing spreadsheets. Mom was at the stove, shoulders hunched in that permanently apologetic way. Karen sat at the table, scrolling through her phone with lazy, deliberate swipes. "Mara, honey," my mother began, voice unnaturally bright. "Karen has a wonderful new idea for the neighborhood. A little renovation company to handle all the HOA-approved upgrades. You know how good she is with these things." I looked at Karen's hands. Clean, nails perfectly filed, hands that had never touched a hammer. I said nothing, just sat down. "The thing is," my mother continued, turning with a dish towel twisted in her hands, "it takes a little capital to get the community project off the ground. Tools, a truck, all HOA approved, of course." I already knew where this was going. The familiar tightening in my chest arrived right on cue. I had a separate savings account, my safety net built since college. It was mine. I was telling Karen about the money you've saved up. Mom said, eyes pleading. "Just a little startup loan for the neighborhood." Of course, I kept my voice even. "My savings are for down payment on my own place." "Mom, we've talked about this." That was when Karen put her phone down. The soft click on the cheap wood veneer sounded like a gavel. She leaned forward, lacing her soft hands together, giving me the smile she reserved for moments like this. All teeth and no warmth. "We're just borrowing, Mara. That's what good neighbors do. We help each other out. When the project takes off, you'll be the first one paid back with interest." The words hung slick and cloying. Good neighbors. Her definition was a one-way street. I paid the HOA fine she conveniently invented. I bought the mulch she demanded. I contributed to the special assessments on a neighborhood that wasn't truly mine, while she contributed citations and empty promises. No, I said. The word was quiet but absolute. Her smile didn't falter, but the light in her eyes died. Don't be difficult, dear. We're all in this together. I'm not being difficult. I'm being smart. No. She pushed her chair back, legs scraping harshly. She stood and walked around the table toward me. The smell hit first, stale coffee and the faint chemical scent of her signature lavender air freshener. It was the smell of her entitlement. She was close enough I could see the tiny broken blood vessels on her nose from too many community happy hours. "What did you just say to me?" she asked, voice a low growl. I lifted my chin. No, it happened so fast. Her hand, the one she claimed was so good at protecting neighborhood standards, came up in a cross. The slap cracked through the air. My head snapped sideways, stars spraying across my vision. I stumbled, hip crashing against the table before I crumpled to the floor. A sharp cry came from my mother. I lay there a second, cheek blazing. Through the ringing, I watched Karen. She looked down with cold, satisfied authority. She had restored order. Then she turned, snatched my complaint folder from the counter, and tossed it. It sailed into the living room. The crash of the heavy folder hitting the side table was followed by the splintering of a framed HOA award and the skitter of my papers across the hardwood. A shard of glass glittered like a fallen star. I pushed myself up slowly. My mother stood frozen by the stove, hands over her mouth. Her eyes were filled with tears, but not for my pain. They were for the disruption, for the ugliness that had breached her carefully constructed piece of suburban life. She looked at me on the floor and did nothing. In that moment, I knew with soul-deep certainty the real pain wasn't the sting on my face. It was the silence. The vast, echoing abyss of her silence told me I was utterly alone. That was the real violation. The slap was just a transaction. The silence was the betrayal. The next morning the sun rose with indifferent cheerfulness. My cheek was a throbbing purple testament. I spent 20 minutes in the bathroom becoming an artist of concealment. Green concealer, thick camouflage cream, high turtleneck. I chose my outfit with strategic care. I had meetings downtown. As I gathered my laptop, I heard my mother and Karen murmuring in the kitchen, voices low and placating. I slipped out without a word, the click of the lock feeling final. At the office, I kept my head down, finding comfort in numbers that didn't lie. Around noon, a colleague asked if I was okay. Just clumsy this morning. I laughed brittlely. Tripped over the dog. I don't even own a dog. The lie came so smoothly it frightened me. Later, my phone lit up. Mom's text in Vietnamese. Don't make a big deal. Karen was just stressed about the HOA. She feels terrible. Please. Attached was the English plea. She feels terrible. Mara, please. I began typing the furious reply. She assaulted me. She threw my papers. You stood there. Then I stopped. Deleting every word was an act of desolate acceptance. I wasn't deleting a text. I was deleting the expectation that my mother would protect me. With that gone, I knew I would protect myself. That night, the house was suffocatingly normal. Karen had brought over a cheap bouquet of carnations that now sat on the dining table, cloying scent filling the air. She spoke to me in soft, careful tones, asking about my day, an act of penance that was pure performance. I played my part, polite, distant. After they went to bed, I opened my laptop and began the process of opening a new high-yield savings account with no paper trail. I rented a P.O. box that afternoon. I transferred small stagger amounts and set up automatic transfers. I created a new password-protected spreadsheet buried deep in old work files. I named it Rainfall. It was my private ledger. In it, I began documenting every dollar I had overpaid in HOA fees, every informal donation to my mother that had vanished into Karen's projects. A month went by. The bruise faded through sickly greens and yellows. A tense truce held the neighborhood together. Karen had started her side venture, Whitaker Community Renovations, LLC, claiming it would handle all HOA-approved upgrades. One Saturday, While helping Mom sort mail, I saw the bank statement. A wire transfer 2 weeks prior. $18,000 to Whitaker Community Renovations, LLC. My blood ran cold. I waited until Karen left for her inspection rounds. I placed the statement in front of my mother in the kitchen. "Mom, what is this?" She glanced and fluttered. "Oh, it's for the community, Mara. An investment to buy proper tools for the neighborhood upgrades." Karen said it's all our money now. The words hit like another slap. Their definition of community was parasitic. My mother wasn't just a victim. She was a willing participant, sacrificing her retirement on the altar of Karen's approval. That night, I stared in the bathroom mirror. The physical bruise was gone, but the woman looking back had hard, calculating eyes. The trust was gone. The daughter who would do anything for her mother's happiness was gone. In her place was an accountant, and the books were unbalanced. I leaned in, breath fogging the glass. It wasn't just my savings anymore. It was the $18,000 siphoned from my mother's future. The respect taken from me. The safety shattered. The silence. I would get all back. Every dime. Every ounce of dignity. Vengeance is not a fire. It's a blueprint. My grief cooled into resolve. I was a forensic accountant. My job was to follow the money. For the first time, I turned my skills inward. The collection began in silence. In the small hours, I became a ghost. First target, the filing cabinet in the home office Karen had helped organize for my mother. The lock was a joke. I wore thin latex gloves. I photographed every page under my phone light. Mother's dwindling retirement, the equity in the house, increasing HOA liens. Each photo a data point in the graph of their decline. Back in my room, the photos became the first entries in the encrypted rainfall vault. My professional curiosity, weaponized, next turned to Whitaker Community Renovations, LLC. 10 minutes on the state business registry showed it registered 6 weeks ago. Sole proprietor Karen Whitaker. Registered address a P.O. box. No contracting license. No insurance. It was a shell designed to hold money without scrutiny. The $18,000 transfer was the bloody fingerprint. I set up email filters forwarding financial correspondence to an anonymous address. I watched the money flow. Payment to a used truck dealership, thousands at electronic stores, cash withdrawals near the casino. Each receipt cataloged in rainfall. Every night after the house slept, I sorted findings, copied the folder to a tiny external drive, and hid it deep in the HVAC vent above my closet using anti-static foam. One night, documenting withdrawals, a thought crystallized. I could take this to the authorities. I had enough for fraud and abuse of power. But the legal system was a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. Karen must be the agent of her own destruction. The trap must be of her own design. I would provide the bait and the lock. To set a trap, you first need the complete trust of your target. My transformation began the next day. I came down for breakfast and smiled. "Morning. Smells good." Karen looked up, suspicion narrowing her eyes. My mother stared like a deer in headlights. "I was thinking about your community renovation project, Karen. It sounds like a great opportunity. I'm sorry I was so difficult before. I was just worried." The suspicion melted into smug satisfaction. She had won. From that day, I became her biggest supporter. Over dinner, I asked questions, feigning investor interest. "How are you handling invoices? Tracking mileage for tax purposes? You should incorporate as an LLC to protect personal assets." Each piece of advice was a stone guiding her deeper into my maze. She soaked it up, ego swelling. She started calling me her secret weapon, in-house CFO. She spread crude plans on the table for non-existent upgrades, and I nodded seriously, pointing out costs. Every conversation was recorded by my phone, sitting innocently nearby, audio uploaded to rainfall each night. The plan was now a flowchart in my mind. The evidence gathered. The target's confidence at an all-time high. All I needed was the right moment, the perfect stage to pull the final thread. And I knew exactly where it would be, in the living room, the place where the first debt had been violently incurred. The stage was set on a Tuesday night. Karen called it a celebration. She had landed her first major contract, a complete neighborhood beautification project for the affluent side of Pleasant Grove. The gathering was a small, sad affair in our living room. The guests were two other board members, burly Gus from down the street and his quiet wife Sherry. They sat awkwardly on the couch nursing cheap wine, the air thick with my mother's overeager cooking and Karen's signature lavender. For weeks I had been the perfect supportive neighbor. Now it was time for the final act. I dressed in a simple black dress, on my third glass of what looked like wine, but was cranberry juice. The centerpiece arrived just after 9. Karen produced a sheaf of papers from her leather portfolio and placed them on the coffee table with the gravity of signing a treaty. "And here we are," she announced, voice booming with false modesty. The final piece, a little business loan to cover materials and upfront costs for the community. Just a formality. She handed the pen to my mother. I watched from my armchair. I knew what those papers were. A $50,000 loan from the regional credit union secured against the house equity, entirely in my mother's name. Karen's LLC appeared only as recipient. She was taking no risk. My mother took the pen, hand trembling. "Karen, are you sure? It's a lot of money." "Honey, you have to spend money to make money," Karen soothed, guiding the pen. "This is for us, for the neighborhood." That was my cue. I let out a laugh, too loud, too sharp. All eyes turned. I swayed slightly, holding my glass aloft. To Karen, the master businesswoman, so smart she even knows how to leverage all her assets. I stepped closer, peering at the documents. "This is fantastic, but I have one little question. Karen, when you put all this together, you did remember to use my name as the personal guarantor, right? Just to be safe." The silence was absolute. Gus and Sherry exchanged uneasy glances. My mother's pen froze. Karen's smile tightened. "Mara, you've had a little too much to drink." "No, this is great," I insisted, voice now clear and sharp. "I'm just making sure the paperwork is in order. You wouldn't want any discrepancies." I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone and a tiny pocket projector. With a click, a bright white rectangle appeared on the large blank wall behind the television. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Karen hissed, stepping toward me. I ignored her. I opened Rainfall, selected the forgery file. The image flared to life, a screenshot of an email from Karen's account to the loan officer. At the bottom, a scanned image of my forged signature, my full name, social security number lifted from old tax documents, and my stated income. She had committed identity theft and bank fraud in one arrogant email. My mother made a small wounded sound. Gus and Sherry were statues. The projection was her death sentence. A dark flush crept up Karen's neck. "You went through my private emails," she roared, lunging for my phone. I stumbled back, pulling free. My left hand brushed the ceramic vase on the mantel filled with the cheap carnations she had brought after the slap. The gesture looked accidental, but my fingers found the tiny high-definition spy camera I had nestled among the flowers that morning. It was recording everything. I looked her straight in the eye, voice a whisper meant only for her, but perfect for the microphone. "This living room's seen enough lies, Karen." That was the trigger. With a primal scream, she wheeled and hurled her wine glass. It shattered against the wall right next to the ghostly image of my forged signature. Red wine streamed down like blood. The sound of breaking glass was the exclamation point on her downfall. Gus and Sherry were already backing toward the door. My mother wept silently. Karen stood, heaving in the center, exposed in front of everyone. I stood by the mantelpiece, calm. I had it all now. Financial fraud, verbal confession, physical assault on the phone, violent outburst. The trap had sprung. The morning after, the living room was a crime scene of collapse. The jagged red stain marked the wall. My mother cleaned the glass, but the stain remained. She moved with brutal caution, refusing to meet my eyes. While she grieved, I retrieved the micro camera, uploaded the HD video to Rainfall, and hid the drive again. At 10 a.m., I walked into the main branch of the Ohio Millwrights Credit Union for my appointment with Senior Loan Officer Mr. Davies. I was dressed as a professional in charcoal suit and crisp blouse, slim briefcase in hand. Mr. Davies, my name is Mara Hensley. I'm a forensic accountant. I have reason to believe this institution is the target of significant fraud and that my identity has been used illegally. I laid it out clinically. The loan application, the forwarded email with my forged signature, my driver's license beside it for comparison. Then I cued the edited 5-minute video. He watched in silence. My question, the forgery on the wall, Karen's confession and lunge, the shattering glass. When it ended, he looked struck. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will launch an immediate investigation. I advised an immediate hold on all accounts linked to Karen Whitaker and her LLC. It was a directive, not a request. He nodded and reached for the phone. My work there was done. I drove home in preternatural calm. The first domino had fallen. My mother was waiting in the kitchen, face crumpled. Mara, your phone was off. Karen called. The bank froze her account. She can't access the money for the project. I set my briefcase down with crisp finality. There is no project, Mom. She wailed, what have you done? They're going to arrest her. I looked at this woman who was my mother and felt profound distance. No, Mom. They're just taking back what was never hers. A few hours later, the barrage began. Karen's calls lit up my phone. I ignored them. Then the texts. You think you're so smart. You just destroyed the neighborhood. Answer your phone, you coward. You're going to regret this. I'll be ruined. Is that what you want? I screenshotted every message, logged every call, compiled them into a new rainfall file labeled harassment and threats. When I showed the log to a friend in the local police department, she urged a restraining order. I refused. I didn't want her to stay away. I wanted her trapped, panicked, making mistakes. The bank's investigation worked silently, but I couldn't rely on it alone. 2 weeks later, I submitted an anonymous whistleblower report to the IRS detailing the shell company, the $18,000 siphoned, personal expenses paid from community funds, and 3 years of overstated deductions on Karen's returns. Exactly 2 weeks after that, a certified letter arrived. Karen held it, knuckles white, face pasty gray. It was a full comprehensive audit of her personal and business finances for 3 years. She looked up at me across the room, eyes filled with cold terror. She knew this was no coincidence. But I still wasn't done. While the bank and IRS dismantled her life, I turned up the volume. I sent an anonymous package to the Buckeye Business Beacon, a local blog run by tenacious journalist Carla Mendez. It included Karen's smiling LinkedIn photo, a fact-based summary of the fraud investigation and IRS audit. No personal details, just public interest. 48 hours later, the article went live. Local HOA President Karen Whitaker under investigation for bank fraud, tax evasion. The comments section exploded. Residents poured out years of venom. She took $3,000 from my parents for roof repairs, then vanished. She quoted me for a kitchen remodel, then threatened to fine me for slander. She buys cheap materials and charges premium HOA prices. My private war had gained an army. The digital noise breached the house. My mother burst into my room, clutching her phone. It's everywhere. People are saying horrible things. Mara, make this stop. This is our neighborhood. I didn't look up. She isn't our neighborhood, Mom. She's a parasite, and her name deserves every bit of filth. She begged, tears streaming. This is too much. The shame. I finally turned. Do you remember that night, Mom? The night she hit me? Do you remember what she said right before she threw my folder and scattered my life? We're just borrowing. I swiveled the laptop, showing the bank statement balance near zero. She borrowed your future and spent it at casinos and on trucks she never used for the community. I'm not shaming you. She is. I'm just collecting the debt. Mother stared at the proof, fight draining out. She backed away without another word. The story mutated. A local TV station picked it up. Then a comment appeared from Dave from Westerville. Ask her about what she did to her neighbor's daughter. I heard she forged the girl's name for a loan. The firewall between public and private crimes broke. Now I was the victimized resident. The narrative had its hero and villain. The credit union issued a PR block on all her transactions. Her debit cards stopped working. That afternoon, I sat in my car a block away listening to the radio when a news van pulled up. A reporter with aggressively blonde hair ambushed Karen as she took out the trash, face haggard and unshaven. MS. Whitaker, can you comment on the allegations of fraud? Is it true you forged your neighbor's signature? Karen flinched, shielding her face. She stumbled backward, knocking over the garbage can, spilling refuse all over the pristine lawn. I watched through the rearview mirror as the woman who had dominated our lives was reduced to a pathetic figure surrounded by literal garbage. And I smiled, the smile of an accountant who had just balanced a very difficult account. 2 days later, my mother called, her voice thin and broken. She asked to meet at the neutral coffee shop, The Daily Grind. I arrived first, chose a shadowed corner table. When she walked in, she had aged a decade, shoulders slumped, hair unkempt, faded cardigan hanging loose. She sank into the chair, hands trembling. After long silence, she whispered, "You won, Mara. You destroyed her completely, but I've lost everything." I felt weary sadness. "No, Mom. You've lost a liar and a thief. You've lost a mountain of debt that wasn't yours. You still have yourself. You just have to be willing to look at the truth without her standing in the way." The truth was too much. Her face crumpled. "I'm scared." She was company. "I don't want to be alone." "You were already alone the night she hit me, and you stood by the stove, crying for yourself. You've been alone for years. You chose the wrong thing to be afraid of." I reached into my briefcase and slid across a thick cream envelope. "It's a choice. The first real choice you've had in a long time." She opened it. The multi-page document, Petition for Dissolution of Association Support Agreement, drafted by my sharp divorce-style lawyer. It cited financial fraud, abuse of power, and irreconcilable differences. It severed her from Karen's debts and liabilities. Everything filled out. All it needed was her signature. Her trembling hand reached for the pen. She signed with a single tear falling beside her name, spreading through the paper like a sorrowful seal. She pushed the papers back. It was done. I folded them carefully. The war was not over, but the first real freedom had been handed back. The divorce papers, recast as a formal complaint and withdrawal of support, were served to Karen by a stone-faced process server at the cheap motel where she had fled. Her accounts frozen, credit canceled, reputation smoldering ruin, IRS audit hanging like a guillotine. She was a queen with no kingdom. She had nothing left to lose, and that made her predictable. The call came 3 days later from a blocked number. I answered on the first ring. "Mara." Her voice was a ragged rasp stripped of arrogance. "Please, just one time, face to face. No tricks. For the neighborhood's sake. I'll let the silence stretch." "Fine. One meeting. 10 minutes. The living room. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Come alone." The next day at 3:30, I sat in my car a block away, laptop open to the live feed from the state-of-the-art surveillance system I had installed for safety. The living room appeared empty, bathed in slanted yellow light, the faint dark wine stain still visible on the wall. I activated recording. Then I called my police contact with an anonymous tip. The fugitive Karen Whitaker would be at her former neighbor's residence in 30 minutes. At precisely 4 o'clock, the front door opened. Karen shuffled in, gaunt, rumpled, patchy gray stubble on her chin. The confident stride gone. She stood in the center, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. I gave her 5 minutes before I walked in. The door clicked shut behind me. She jumped. "Your 10 minutes started 5 minutes ago," I said, arms crossed in the doorway. She stumbled toward me, hands raised. "Look, I know I messed up. It got out of control. I never meant for any of this. We can make a deal. I'll sign anything. I'll disappear. Just a few thousand to start over. It's the last thing I'll ever ask." The arrogance was breathtaking. After everything, Here, she was in the room where she had assaulted me, asking for money. "We can rebuild," she pleaded, eyes wild. "You, me, your mom, we can still be a community." I took one deliberate step inside. "You've borrowed enough, Karen. You borrowed my mother's future. You borrowed my name. You borrowed my silence." I looked her dead in the eye. "Now it's time to pay it back." The hope died, replaced by ugly rage. "You won't give me anything?" she snarled. "Not a goddamn dime. Not a dime." "Then what was the point of bringing me here?" she screamed. Closure. That word broke her. With a roar, she grabbed the wooden end table and hurled it against the wall. It shattered. She kicked the floor lamp crashing down. "You did this to me. You set out to ruin me from the beginning." In the middle of her tirade, the front door burst open. Two uniformed officers stormed in, guns drawn. "Police! Don't move. Get on the ground." Karen froze, arms raised. She spun, face grotesque with shock and dawning horror. As one officer forced her down, snapping handcuffs, her eyes locked with mine. You set me up." I looked down at the woman who had taken so much, now kneeling on the spot where I had fallen. I felt nothing but the quiet finality of a ledger balanced. "No, Karen. You borrowed your own downfall." They hauled her out, a broken mess of threats and curses. I stood alone in the sudden, profound silence. The fresh splinters, the dent in the wall, the faint red stain, all illuminated by late afternoon sun. It was over. The debt was settled, paid in full. A week later, my mother moved in with me. She appeared at my apartment door with 2 suitcases and a box of old photo albums, an act of quiet surrender. My small one-bedroom was clean lines and uncluttered surfaces. We found a new rhythm. She spent days reading. Evenings we ate in a silence that for the first time was truly peaceful. She was rebuilding herself piece by piece. The house was lost to foreclosure. The neighborhood held an estate auction. I felt only clinical detachment. They were just things. The real damage had never been to the property. The final official end came on a quiet Tuesday. I sat at my kitchen table scrolling news, and there it was, Karen Whitaker's mug shot under harsh lights, puffy and vacant. Headline: Local HOA president indicted on federal charges of bank fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I archived the link into the now-dormant rainfall folder. The case was closed. That evening, my mother found me by the window. I saw her picture today. She was quiet a long time. "Do you hate her, Mara? After everything she did to us, to you?" I considered the word. "No. Hate is a debt you carry yourself. I was only ever interested in collecting the debts owed to me. I didn't destroy her. I just handed her the bill for what she had already bought." She held my gaze, and a flicker of profound understanding passed. She whispered, "The living room is peaceful again." And I knew she finally understood. The false peace of that other house had been the silence of a cage. This was the peace of release. As if on cue, a light rain began to fall outside, drops streaking the clean glass. The same sound as the night it all began. But the memory had no power. The fear was gone. The anger was gone. The need for vengeance was gone. They had all been settled, accounted for, and filed away. I felt quiet, balanced. I no longer owed anyone my silence. He, Karen, on the other hand, was just beginning to pay a debt that could never be repaid with money. Her borrowing had finally come due, and her account was permanently overdrawn. The courthouse steps felt heavy with the weight of the world waiting outside. Cameras flashed like lightning. Microphones dipped. Reporters shouted. My lawyer whispered I didn't have to speak. I shook my head. This was the public ledger. My face a mask of calm. A reporter pushed forward. Karen Whitaker was just sentenced to 10 years. The judge called her a parasite who preyed on the trust of her own neighbors. What are your thoughts? The world held its breath. I looked directly into the camera lens. My voice clear and cold. Some debts are paid in silence. Others in the living room. That was all I gave them. The phrase was the entire story distilled. The cameras erupted again. Behind me, the heavy door opened. My mother stepped out, silhouetted against the archway, posture straighter than I had seen in years. She looked past the chaos at the open sky. Our eyes didn't need to meet. Her release was its own verdict. I turned away from the cameras and began walking down the steps. The crowd parted. My heels clicked steadily. I did not look back. There was no soaring victory, only profound quiet, the kind after a violent storm has passed, leaving the air clean and still. Justice didn't need a brass band. Sometimes justice was just the sound of your own footsteps walking away, leaving the wreckage behind without a second glance. As I reached the sidewalk, a single phrase echoed in my mind, her voice from a lifetime ago, slick with cruelty. "We're just borrowing." I kept walking. A small, secret smile touched my lips. Paid in full.